How's it going, everyone? So, before we dive into the episode, I really want to say thank you to everyone that is listening in, that's tuning in, that's enjoying this content and getting value from it. I really love that. That's why I do it. But there's a huge amount of you that are listening that are not subscribed, not following the podcast. And I really want to encourage you to please follow and subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you are listening or viewing this on. It really helps out the podcast. It helps out the algorithm. It helps more people hear this content that you already find helpful and that they hopefully will as well. So if you go ahead and subscribe or follow the podcast on any platform that you're listening on, and please share it with your friends, that'll be great. All right. Thanks, everyone. Let's get into the episode. How's it going, Daniel? It's great to get you on the podcast. I think that we've been planning this thing, I want to say since like June or something at
Yeah.
this point. I mean, primarily my schedule has just been garbage, like it's one thing after another, right? Like the kid gets sick one week, derails me for 2 weeks, and then something comes up. It's always something. It's always an eventful time in my life, I guess.
No, it's so I hope your kid will get better soon. But I'm very happy that we stick into running after each other. And I'm really glad that we have a chance to talk.
Yeah, absolutely. Daniel, I always start people off with telling what made them want to get in IT, what made them want to get into security. And the reason why I start everyone off there is because there's a lot of people that are listening that maybe they're trying to figure out, is IT even possible for me? Like, is this a realistic goal? Should I actually spend time in it? And I feel that hearing everyone's story, right, hearing everyone's background with getting into it or developing that interest is always really helpful, because I remember when I was getting in, all I wanted to hear was someone else came from my same background that did it, right? Because once you hear that, it kind of like unlocks your brain. It's like, oh, this is possible, right? So where did that start for you?
So for me, it started in the Israeli Defense Forces. And so as every Israeli, at 18, I joined the Israeli Defense Forces, and I was very, very happy to join the intelligence. Actually, not the technological side in the beginning. I actually joined a bit more kind of was a forward deployed intelligence type of thing. And I think when you are doing intelligence in the 2010, and I would assume other people that, did some service and relate to this, and you understand that, cyber is a very, very big part of what intelligence is in modern time. And for me, as a person that was always rechasing impact, I felt like, I heard all of these stories about people that said, look, I had this great idea. I woke up in the morning, I went to my computer in the evening, I got all of those things, and I was like, oh, I wanna do that. I wanna do it as well. And so I decided to try and cross the river and to a unit called 8200, which is the second unit of 8200, and I was there in the cyber sector. And actually, despite being already an officer, I started from scratch. I was, from researcher, team leader, and forward. So this was my path into cyber and technology overall.
So when you were on the intelligence side, would that be like the equivalent to an officer in America's intelligence services?
Yeah.
Okay. So that tells me, things of like what I can ask and whatnot, right? Like I've had former like CIA officers on, and I mean, my audience, they can go back and listen to those episodes. Like there was like 5 questions where I asked him, he's like, yeah, I can't say that, right? It's like, but that's really interesting. So when you were in that role, you saw the impact of technology, on your role. When you were in it, in that 2010 timeframe, right? Did you see the role potentially transforming into like, hey, I'm like at some point I'm part hacker and part officer, right? Like was there a transformation there going on? I imagine that there could be, right? Because I'm not asking you to speak about any of this. So I don't expect you to even know anything about it, right? But I'm thinking about Stuxnet in terms of, okay, like now it's like kind of blending almost, right? Because we're finding out that, one of the methods that they could have potentially gotten the USB drive in was through like the water system, and then, someone on the inside pulled it out and put it into a server and whatnot. I mean, that's all conjecture, right? It's all assumptions, right? But like to me, from a cybersecurity professional, it sounds like, okay, you have someone that has some knowledge that is a little bit beyond just like the physical aspect of being an officer, right? And so was that present? And then is that kind of what sparked that interest of, oh, I want to go more on the cyber side, right? I want to go maybe to the people that are creating this stuff and whatnot.
So
Does
I
that make sense?
no, it is. I can't talk about Stockton or anything because I wish I would knew more. I wish I would, I knew more back there. And but I think when it comes to this, at least for me, it's always about those experiences where essentially you're sitting in a room and trying to make a decision from the other side of the room. I'm not talking about like we're always taking it in our heads to special ops. Even like you know you're trying to do like a defense mission on from like a counter-terror type of mission. And I think that 2010s really shifted the way towards understanding how much impact does this, cyber has, both in the ability of the real-time aspects of it, as well as the ability to really understand deeply things that are, really, really hard. I think that the last few years kind of showed us, and I think in Israel specifically, that it cannot go by itself. It should always be as part of the overall, I would say, methodologies. But at least for me, I was like, how come there is such an important part of my job that I don't really understand that? And at least for me, like this, alongside the fact that I saw the impact and I saw the enthusiasm, and I also saw the opportunity to actually make a difference. I think one of the amazing things about cyber is that, and I always remember when I talked about it when I changed, is that sometimes in order to do like complex like intelligence missions, you need like big teams and like months of preparation, like physical complexities. And with cyber, you still need like highly trained, very, 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 very successful people, and a lot of preparation. But essentially, one of my best experiences, I remember I had one of my soldiers when I was already a team leader, she was like, I have this idea, let's try this out. And from a no-go to a wow, we did it in less than 24 hours with 2 people in a room, this was like a crazy dream come true. And for me, at least, was, it's part of the ability to create an impact. Now, from the defender side, I'm saying that I think that, it's also part of the challenge, because we're living in a world where, the number of people that are capable of doing those things is just crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, that's fascinating. There's a lot of like rabbit holes that we could go down with what you just said, but I think it's really important though to have purpose in your work, to be like, hey, this matters, right? Those people may not even realize that it matters, but it matters. And I think that was one of the things that kind of opened my eyes to cybersecurity, right? Because a little background, right? I got my bachelor's degree in criminal justice. I wanted to go into the federal government. I wanted to go and be that officer that's like in the, a dark hole on the earth, just trying to, make the world a better place, right? Like I really wanted to do that. I really wanted to have that impact. I figured I probably wouldn't make it past the age of 40. I probably wouldn't have a family or whatever, right? Because I was fully sold into this thing. And during the the interview process, right? It's a 2-year process. I'm in help desk, and someone at that company was like, "Hey, you should think about, cybersecurity. Like, why don't you go pick up this Security Plus book and see if it interests you, right?" And so I've told this story before, but I picked it up and I couldn't put it down. And so just to be sure, I picked up a Network Plus book, and that thing would only put me to sleep. I mean, it wouldn't matter where I was, how well rested I was, or anything like that. Like I would be at work and I would wake up 30 minutes later and my boss would be like, "Joe, what the hell are you doing?" And I'm like, "I'm sorry, man. Like I can't be reading this book at work. It just puts me to sleep." You know, but that was the thing that kind of caught my attention. And then I started to realize, oh, I can spend a lifetime in these different domains of security, right? Like a light passion of mine, right? That I'm starting to get back into a little bit, probably because my PhD is forcing me to, is wireless security, right? So the wireless security, like the hacking side of it, came very easy to me in my master's, right? Like that, because it was a very hands-on program. So like you're not just talking about, oh yeah, this is why, WPA is bad or WEP is bad. It's like, no, I'm in the lab, like I'm manipulating these tokens and I'm doing it myself, right? Like I understand it very well, which is more than I can say for malware reverse engineering. That was like extraordinarily difficult. That was like the only class that I got a B or a C in, during my whole program. And I was so mad because I spent so much time on it and still sucked. But like, this is a field, where you can have a lot of impact in other people's lives, even if it's just your own company's, your own employees' data and whatnot, right? Which really isn't even the case anymore. I don't think, because if you're a company, you probably have someone else's data to some extent. But I don't mean to ramble, right? But like finding that purpose, I think, is critical, and it definitely helped me quite a bit.
Well, totally. And I think that one of the things that I experienced because of the transition, and I think I would assume you experienced, and I think that implicitly you kind of said, it's like, I think that if you don't come with this, there is a lot of struggle in the beginning because it's such a big world. Now, even now within the company, so we build the company, like the company I'm in, we develop. Of course, most of our workers are people that came from the same units and kind of did security for long. But when we start onboarding other people, you start seeing what richness of a world there is when it comes to security. And I think that for many people, when it's like their first step in, also for myself, I remember, and my wife is also like in computer and security. And I remember I sat with her in the beginning just to understand like the basics, because there is a bar, the barrier to entry is still so high, I think, in the
Yeah,
beginning. But I think going back to what you said, I think that if you really I think that security is not a profession for people that doesn't love to learn. But if you are enthusiastic about learning, if you are enthusiastic about like technology and about innovation, I think you just find yourself once you cross the bar, once you are, start like, you start mentioning like WPA and other encryption things, but, underneath it's like, okay, understanding how, RF is working and understand how, encryption is working. Like, so many things that encapsulate like those two words that you mentioned there. And I think that once you cross the bar and start understanding the concept, and I was very lucky for my wife to be there for me. But it's just such a big world. It's such a crazy world, such an
yeah,
impactful world.
yeah. That's a really good point. Like when you're getting started, that bar is actually high, but once you get into it, you realize, man, that was nothing, right? I was a couple of years ago. This episode actually never released because the the government stepped in and basically informed me in other ways, like, hey, this episode probably shouldn't go live, right? And I'm not someone to have the government show up at my door, and so yeah, I prefer to have my freedom, right? So, but I was talking to a cyber warfare developer for the U.S. military, and so this guy, gets a target package, figures out, how to hack it in the way to provide an officer or the government just overall, right, with the intelligence that they're looking for. They give the guy the target and they say, we want this in the end, and he figures out how to get it. And one of the things I asked him was, have you ever like been handed a target package that you just couldn't figure out, you know, how to hack the cell phone, how to hack the laptop, whatever it is, did you ever, you know, reach a dead end? And he actually said no. He said literally, like, if you, as long as you're creative, and you have the right tools in front of you and you have the right training, there's literally nothing you can't do. And so I dove into the training a little bit with him. Again, like this episode, it was a situation where it's like, okay, I know just from my prior experience, that you definitely cannot be talking about any of this shit. I'll probably edit out that bad word. I'm sorry. But, you probably can't be talking about any of this stuff. And so I figured while I'm even talking to the guy, this is never going to go live. But he was talking about the training that he goes through, right? Just to be in that role. And it's like a 2.5 year training, which is interesting to me because again, right, like I'm very into like the special forces and intelligence side of things. I learn everything that I can about that area. You look at like special forces training, those guys are training for 2.5 years minimum, like 2.5 years just to get their foot in the door to be like, yeah, I'm a Navy SEAL. Yeah, I'm a Green Beret or a Ranger or whatever it might be, right? And it's interesting to see that translate over to the cyber world, right? Because what he was telling me is like, you know coding languages so well that you're dreaming in code. Like you're literally dreaming in code and you're figuring out new ways. You have tests every 2 hours, every single day of the week, 7 days a week. Like there's literally no breaks. Every once in a while you get, a day off, just to like recoup and whatnot. But to be so immersed in that world is really, I mean, it's fascinating. You're not going to get that anywhere else. Like I work from home, right? And so sometimes it's difficult for me to fully immerse myself into that world, even though I have all of the liberty to research and study whatever I want. But to be at that level, to know it so well, it's like the back of your hand, and that doesn't even describe it properly, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, I think one of the things I'm seeing, and I can talk about myself. I can talk about my co-founder Itai, and most of our teams, like they are crazy good people. Some of them, some
Yeah.
of them started this when they were like, and our architect was like, he told me like he got into security because he wanted to get some more coins in one of the first games he played. And okay, so let's find how to create, like generate a key. Let's find out, and then like from here to what he is today, which is probably one of the best researchers that I know. And we have some of them there. But I think that like you mentioned, and I think it goes to every craft, I would say. I think every craft, and we can go away from even like, it's always about like, muscle memory and intuition. And they are both functions of a lot of experience. Because, intuition essentially is like, people think that intuition is something that you just have or not have. And of course, some people just, have a better, probably like, they're wired maybe in a better way to understand certain things, but essentially, all right, Einstein told that like intuition is a matter of like how much time did you tried it before. And I think that we're seeing, just going back to security and others, it's just like, you have to do it again and again and again and again and again until it starts, built up in the muscle memory, but also in the intuition. I think that the part of the so-called like challenge when it comes to security, unlike maybe other crafts, is that the muscle memory might be deceiving sometimes. Because going back to this, we're living in a world where the pace of change is so, so we are in application security. And I think that applications or product security today. And I think product security practitioners, they're living in a world where technologies are changing so quickly that their basic intuition is a key, but they always have to be in this position of, but maybe something new has happened, maybe something new has changed. So I need to go with my intuition because this will, 80%, but I always need to be open-minded. And we actually see, I'm very lucky, some of our customers, some of the prospects we're working with, the best security practitioner I know are the ones that on the one side have like immense intuition and immense, just, opinion about how things should be but on the other side, extremely open-minded and eager to learn. I see it also from our team, like engineering side or developer side, as well as the customer. And because the world is changing very fast.
It's an interesting problem, right? Because technology is changing so quickly, but it's like it's changing at an increasing rate. Like it's not changing at the same rate that it used to, 10 years ago when I got into security, right? I had already been into IT for maybe 5 years before that, right? I loosely say that because it was like a help desk college role, right? When I was getting in, even just 10 years ago, it was very different, right? Cloud security wasn't a thing. That was not a field. That was we don't need security in the cloud. The cloud takes care of all of it. That was that mentality, right? I mean, that was 100% of that mentality. And now cloud security is getting to such a scale, right? Where just 10 years later, now we're kind of venturing down the path of, oh, I need a cloud security IAM person. I need a cloud security network person. Like I need someone that does the infrastructure side of cloud security. And I think companies are slowly waking up to that, because right now, typically companies are like, oh, I just need one cloud security guy and he'll do it all. And I'm sitting here like, to do everything that I do, you basically have to be a developer, an infrastructure guy, a help desk guy, a network guy. I mean, you are an entire IT team all in one. And God forbid my CISO is out, because now I'm also the acting CISO over the cloud. It's like, man, this is a lot.
Yeah.
And it,
No, I tell you, yeah. Sorry.
yeah,
Over.
yeah. I mean, well, I'm just saying, like, you look at other industries, right? Over 10 years, it doesn't change that much. Like, arguably, it really doesn't. But it seems like we're going at a pace that's like a breakneck pace, and AI, it's only making it faster, right? So we're already at a deficit in talent in the world to fill these roles. We're already not able to fill these roles, but it's only going to expand. It's only going to grow significantly.
Yeah, no, I talked about, I remember going back to, let's talk, we are really experiencing kind of the changes in product security and application security. And I remember, going back to your days, even, back then, when you thought about application security, it was okay, my developers I need to provide them something to scan their code. But it's my developers need to scan their code. I put some web application firewall, but the concept was, okay, let's talk firewalls. Let's talk, layer 3 problems. Okay, it's a layer 7 issue, but it was, and to be honest, like for many years, it was okay because, you had like one entry point, like you had like DMZ, and now everything going in, going out. Like it was very kind of,
Yeah.
gathered. The amount of languages was somehow like, and not even languages, like, okay, authentication. So each and every developer like build their own stuff. And, there was not so much like third-party integration into the applications and stuff. And now, and also then it was already hard, but it was somehow manageable, I would say. And I'm talking now with people, like product security teams, application security teams. And essentially, we're living in a world where they have to understand and say, they come in, one of their developers tells them, look, we can't really fix it all. Help us understand what it is. Now, they need to understand exactly in the language of this specific thing, why this specific code is allowing an attacker to do something. Now, when they go back to the developer tells them, yeah, I understand, but the Kubernetes configuration doesn't really allow this to happen. So they now need to understand Kubernetes real, right? Yeah, but I understand, but the infrastructure, but the AWS configuration, I understand, but this doesn't really allow this to pass. Okay, but we have a Cloudflare config by the CDN, but the gateway configuration, and it's like, it's so hard. You need to understand everything, not to mention the fact that you need to now know it on not only on your thing, but on the open source, on the third-party applications you have, all the first-party code you have, and essentially the amount of people, like you said, like the amount of people that are taking care of the problem maybe double itself. The amount of problems and the amount of issues probably exponentially grow over time.
Yeah. That's a really good point, because like even just 10 years ago, right? Like the idea was throw WAF in front of your apps and you're good to go,
Yeah.
right?
It was okay. To be honest, I remember from the other side, it was a very good solution back then.
Yeah. Yeah. There was no worry about like code scanning. I mean, there was, stuff out there for code scanning, but people literally, the mentality was, well, if I got a WAF in front of it, what does that matter? The WAF should be catching everything, and that wasn't a terrible mentality. I remember being told, hey, you need to deploy Imperva WAFs to, our environment, and just dreading going through the configuration of it and everything else like that, and I kind of like, I tried to like dodge that project, and now I'm over here like deploying a AWS WAF, to the entire environment, like over 140 accounts in AWS. And I mean, it's everything that I dreaded, 10 years ago. it's it is not fun. And it's like the technology is evolving so quickly that we almost have like fringe, startup technology companies that are the ones that are able to create the product to actually adapt with how quickly these environments are changing. And, I remember when I was doing the RFP for the WAF project that I'm doing right now, there was only one solution that we looked at. We looked at 15 different solutions. There was only one solution that was actually able to scale with the size of the environment that we needed and the diversity of the environment, right? Because it was like, oh, we have stuff in containers, we have stuff, serverless functions, we have functions as a service, we have all of this stuff, right? And there was literally only one vendor, and they were brand new. They were like a 2-3 year old company. And I think unfortunately, that's why we kind of like pass on, because when you're a 2 or 3 year old company and you go into 100-year-old company environment, people are a little bit nervous, right? Me, I'm like, hey, give me them, because I know that they work. I know that they do good work, give me that solution because I know it'll work perfectly fine for our environment. But people get hesitant, when it's that difference, in life, right? They're like, well, we don't know if this company's going to be around in 5 years. We don't know if they're going to be bought by someone or, whatever it might be. And I'm just sitting over here like, well, why don't we buy them?
No, 100%. I think that you had a very like recapping what I said. I think that probably one of the biggest challenges today in security is just velocity, like pure, just velocity, pure. And I think, like you mentioned, velocity is always a game of startups were always, I would say, better to handle velocity because their velocity is like, can get into
Insane.
physics.
Yeah.
But I'm as our own startup. I didn't even like present, but right now I'm kind of the co-founder and CEO of Migo Security, which we are trying to address the exact problems of the application and the product security I mentioned. But putting this aside for a second, maybe I'll talk about it more later. But for us, going back to it's all about velocity because technology changes, like the amount of changes happen, technology changes in both sides, by the way, because the amount of technology your engineer is using is just going wide. And the amount of third-party interdependency, the so-called like within your own system is going wide. We just spoke on authentication before. Think right now, like even try to mention, even in your environment, how many different components are actually touching authentication and how many of them are actually in your control today. It's crazy, like to understand the difference. 10 years ago, one team, one place. Today it's like probably you have an IDP, your gateway is doing some things, your cloud is doing some things, you have microservice here, you have a microservice there, you have a like an old legacy system. So crazy to complain. And I think that the bottom line is that with the velocity, creates a lot of opportunities to the other people that knows how to handle velocity, which is attackers. Especially because attackers really like velocity because it's not only that the amount of technologically is going wide, but also the amount you mentioned AI, the amount of code is just going crazy. Like the amount of code being generated, the amount of commits being done a month, the amount of new API that you're releasing, like it's so hard to manage.
Yeah. Yeah. There's someone on my team that, I mean, you just look at the amount of commits that he made, and he's not a developer, right? He's not a developer, and last month he made over 100 commits to just my code base, just the thing that I own. And I'm sitting here like, how in the world do we keep up, right? Like, is there a good solution for it? Like, how does Migo do it, right? Like, how how do you enable security teams to stay up to date, kind of on top of what's going on in the environment? Because, to be honest, there's times when I don't even know what's going on the outside world, right? Like, I don't even know what's developing, what's coming, or anything like that, because I'm spending so much time in my own environment. I don't even know, like, how to prep for the future, right? So how do you maybe address that, right? How do you make it easier for that internal environment knowledge so that people can, kind of adjust and catch up, I guess, at this point?
Yeah. No, and as you said before, I think it's a learning game, essentially. And then the question is kind of, how do I manage to focus my learning on the right places and know what I need to learn? Like, right, these are like always two questions. And I think that at least for us, we said, let's learn ourselves outside of the security world, how other people try to address this problem, because velocity is not only a problem of security, it's also a problem of IT. It's also a problem of, developers. It's a problem of many people. And I think that the last few years actually created real revolution in the way that people are thinking about monitoring and keeping up with what's happening in the world of observability. So what we said going back, and we are kind of focusing on, the world of how do we help you kind of stay on top of those, changes. So we said, okay, actually like if something will break down in performance, you're probably going to know about it. Maybe not in security, but your DevOps, your SREs, somebody have a tool somewhere and to help you. Maybe you don't have full coverage, maybe you don't have everywhere, but like, observability really changed the way we're thinking about just environments, not security per se. So we said, okay, this is one place we really want to learn from. And the second thing, I think, with the revolution of AI, it's more about, okay, how can I, because, people think sometimes that AI is like this magic wand that you can say, okay, let's put AI, it's like done.
Yeah.
But we said, if you actually combine AI and the ability to utilize AI for anomaly detection and LLMs or any other generative AI for automation of so-called like basic reasoning processes, you can actually, with the right data set, you can actually reduce by much the ability to at least, I would say, triage and take action. And at least for us, we said, okay, so these are the two revolutions that should lead the way that we're thinking about security, like observability and AI. And the way that we did it is we say, how can we take observability and the data you have, as well as kind of other data that we kind of create, in order to really help you tell a story from a security perspective. So like your DevOps are telling, a story about, this is how much, this is the request time. This is the problem here. This is the problem there. How can we tell a story in the world of security? This story is probably going to be around, essentially, I'm sending a request from the internet. Where does it end? What does it allow? This like, and what, like, where does it start? Where does it end? What permission? What data? Like, and essentially it encapsulate other, words that we spoke about maybe before, but like blast radius, exposure. But essentially it's all about, from an application or product standpoint, I'm sending a request. What data query it allows me to do, essentially. And in the past, monolith application, it was an easier problem. In a world of distributed application it's almost impossible problem. But thank God for observability and for amazing projects like, OpenTelemetry or to like, other things that we're utilizing, the Elastic Profiler and like other tools that are, becoming industry standard, in order to really kind of do what we call deep tracing, essentially distributed tracing alongside like deep application profiling. And this allows us to essentially help you see your application and then utilize all of those AI things in order to start asking questions about them. Because going back to the commits, out of those, like you said, hundreds of commits, you probably care only about those who actually change something in exposure, something in data access, or maybe something, or introducing a new risk or violating a policy that you didn't really want to have.
That's interesting. So you're kind of approaching it almost from like the reverse side. You're saying, well, what do people care about the most, right, from different changes and commits and whatnot? And then we'll provide visibility around that to give them the ability to respond. And we'll also provide some sort of enhanced, capability with AI to respond quickly. Is that Does that kind of sum it up correctly?
Yeah, I think that the world that we want to live in, going back to this, is a world where, in order to give control back to security people, in order to be on top of this, the expertise, going back to the intuition, will always be with people. Like, I think that we're seeing that AI can take you so far, at least for now, right? And then the question is, how can we help you better enforce the things that you want to know about and better act on them to start being asked? Because today, when it comes to product security and other stuff, we just kind of talked about, tracing. But then if you are actually introducing into this, you mentioned like, how do I know about how things are happening in the world? So, okay, now I know about my application, how every transaction starts from the internet where it ends. Now, another question is, okay, so how attackers actually attack my application? Like not my application, but any application. So this is where the threat intel feed and where the vulnerability feed comes in to overlay with this to say, okay, so now I understand that from all of the different attacks, all of the different vulnerabilities that there in the world, this is where I'm actually, vulnerable to an attack. And for that, and then like the flow that we want to create is a flow where, those product security teams can actually live in a world where, something new has happened. I get a notification on this. It can automatically, because I have this visibility, can automatically identify, okay, it's great that I have this 50,000 times in my code. But really, really, when we look at it and how your application actually behaves, when we're kind of taking all of the production context from all of the different tools you have, when we're kind of analyzing how your application actually works, it's really exploitable in like 3-4 places. And of these 4 places, the things and this is how an attacker will exploit it. And here we're actually utilizing AI to emulate like how it's going to look like. And then like all of the, provide me a proof to the developer, provide me a proof, show me it's really done. Like, dude, this is tracing, you know it from your SRE, like address it like a production issue, go fix it. But on the other side, we can tell you, look, if you change going back to your big like WAF project, because your WAF might not be configured right now in a way that allows you to stop it because they are maybe, because now need to go configure this. So the other side is, okay, we already know how it is. We already know we have a WAF. Let's help you so on the one side, let's help you open a Jira ticket or whatever you want, a ticketing for the developers and open an SLA to like, okay, this is the foolproof thing. But on the other side, like, Joe, this is the WAF configuration you need to make right now in order to buy yourself those 12 hours until it's been fixed. And at least for us, this is how we believe that the future of product security should be, where the entire so-called middle manual work is being automated to allow you to really define what you want to focus on and to make sure that your action are being done by developers. And 2 are you have the ability to actually understand how to mitigate it in the meantime.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. It does take the term application security and it turns it into something completely different. Like you say, like product security, because that's a more holistic view, right? When maybe the number one thing when I'm dealing with developers is them understanding the actual context of what I'm talking about, right? I say cross-site scripting risk or cross-site scripting vulnerability. And if they know what cross-site scripting is, they still don't understand what I'm saying, right? I barely know what cross-site scripting is. Like every once in a while, I got to look it up to refresh my memory, But that's really fascinating that it provides that proof, because the number one thing that I'm always asked, well, where's the proof, right? This doesn't even happen in our environment. No one even comes to our application and does this. Why are we putting in the work to do it? What's the proof? We don't even know if this is a real thing. And their first question to me always is, well, can you even pull this off? And I'm sitting here like, well, technically I can't. I can't even have like that kind of VM in our environment. My CISO literally won't let me because he thinks I'm just going to blow up the world if I have something like that in the environment, And so that becomes a very sticky point for me, and then it also, like on the reverse side, right? It comes to mind, maybe a couple months ago, I had 150 developers on the call at the same time, which was very odd for me because when they set it up and then they invited me to it, and I'm like, okay, there must be something like really wrong going on, right? And they're trying to get me to put in an exception for something, and they weren't explaining it properly, right? And they were intentionally not doing it properly because they wanted me to put in an exception thinking it was one thing when it was actually another, because they didn't want to spend the next 2 months, working on this thing to really iron it out and make it right. And after like 30, 35 minutes of me questioning them, I finally got to the truth of them essentially wanting to bypass the WAF that I've just spent 2 years of my life trying to get deployed and rolled out and configured and everything else like that. You know, but in that situation, I think about it from like both sides, right? We're showing the validity of this attack, and then we would also be able to show the validity of that configuration change, saying, "Hey, I can't I can't make this configuration change, or I can't allow this in the environment because it's going to do X, Y, and Z." If I wouldn't have spent the 30 minutes going through those questions and, being used to being badgered by different people to get something through, right? If I wasn't used to that sort of thing, I would have just made the exception, not thought anything about it. I would have figured, hey, they're the experts. They're the devs. They know about the code. They know about these apps. I don't know about these apps. I don't know about the code. I'm at a disadvantage, but I knew better to keep on asking. But it sounds like from your solutions perspective, I could have probably just pulled it up and seen it, right there, right? Like, if I make this change, what would that be? And it kind of just like filters through, and I would be able to at least have that knowledge in a more quick, available way to me, which is, I mean, honestly, that's critical, right? Because as security people, you're always called in at the last minute, right? Like right when something needs to get done, you're called in at the last minute and you're expected to understand this very complex problem, and I feel like your solution may provide that guidance that we're lacking almost.
And I think it goes back to your intuition, because going back to what you said, your personality and your intuition probably allowed you to identify this issue, right? Because
Yeah.
I would know, and knowing a lot of security personas, it's not easy to sit in front of 150, like probably the most expensive meeting of this year in your
Yeah.
company. So it's like, sitting in a room and asking them a question for 30 minutes. And we all know, like, we are developers. We know you have no patience for those people that, like, you have no patience with security when those points in time comes. And then it becomes this game of like attestations of like, let's hypothesize this. Okay, so maybe let me understand this. Okay, but no, in our code, it's not really like this. And for at least for us, it came to a realization that, like even the best teams, and it sounds like you have, like, the fact that they called you in means that you have a very good relationship with them. But even the teams with the best relationship today have no common ground to even talk about what's true. And I think going back to this, like even before we kind of, and this is why it's so important for us to kind of, and kind of waste, this is where we believe that the observability, but really deep observability and like the ability to take the same data, but to take it into security context is so important, because what we believe in is like such a conversation should go like, look, guys, let's open this. Wherever it is, doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter if it's we provide it in Migo, but like, let's put it aside. But from a concept perspective, let's open this. Let's have this conversation. You can show me like, okay, if we're doing this, how things will change. Okay, you understand that right now we are open a direct path from the internet to like a PII, right? So you understand that I'm not able to do an exception of this. So, and it's like the entire conversation changed. Now, you might say something like, okay, so maybe let's enforce something different otherwise. Maybe let's do this, maybe. But it allows a thing, a place where, going back to this, we start talking evidence, we start talking knowledge, because I think that like we can't expect even the most amazing product security team, most amazing security teams, 20 people, whatever, many people, to handle so many changes. And it's not only
Yeah.
this, like you mentioned, it's like all the new code that is being pushed, all the updates that are being pushed. There is a feature that requires a configuration issue, but you're still being called to this because, and like, who's being called now? Maybe it's not the AppSec even being called. Maybe it's a cloud security engineer that doesn't have the context, because it does, like, it's such a complex problem, and the truth is so slippery. We have to start talking more evident, because I think that the siloed approach today is really it's really creating like an unnecessary friction.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think you also bring up a really good point about the relationship, right? That must exist for me to even get invited to that call, right? And it's interesting. I don't even think about it that much because I do it kind of, like innately. As soon as I get into a role, I'm meeting as many people as I possibly can. But like, I really did take the time to build those relationships with those developers. I mean, I went completely out of the way most of the time just to talk with them, you know, send them Uber Eats gift cards, GitHub gift cards, or not GitHub, Grubhub, just to like show like, hey, I'm acknowledging you. You
I see
matter.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, your work really matters to me, right? And now they give me the time of the day, right? Like if I need 30 minutes with them, they give it to me. There's no issues with other people, with just about everyone else. And I am slowly finding out they're like, man, I can't get a hold of these devs. I'm like, what? Like, I'll go text him right now. He'll respond to me in 5 minutes, and it's true, right? And people are like kind of blown away about how that's possible, but it all starts with that relationship, and then a strong technology like yours comes in and it gives you all that knowledge, all that insight that you need, that maybe that dev is a little bit nervous about telling you, like it's
Or maybe they don't know, like I think that,
right.
today it comes back to, I think security and engineering is like two sides of the same, the same partnership, right? But I think that today when it comes to this, and you mentioned like multiple things, but I think that, being engineers ourselves, this is, we highly evaluate the people that actually know what they're talking about. Always. I think that the number one, when it comes to technological mindset, if somebody sounds like they don't know what they talk about, they lose credibility very quickly. And I think that the second thing is that, you really want to get something out of this when it comes to like learning something new, knowing something new. So going back to this, when you talk to them about XSS, they learn something new about it. Like they gain something from this conversation. And I think going back to the initial problem, I think that today we are almost standing a lot of like, I'm hearing this, somebody get like 10,000 vulnerabilities. He automatically calls security of like, okay, what do I do with all of this? I don't know. And then security is kind of, is losing credibility, because what can I do with it? So, some people from a personality perspective can create those relationships. But for some of them, we're living in a world today where we have to find a way, going back to this, like kind of how we envision this is to say, look, I checked this for you. Going back to this is the proof. We already managed to recreate. Like, can you pull it yourself? Yeah, I already managed to. I have a tool to recreate it. Look, go check it yourself if you want. But like, I already checked it for you. This is what you need to do. Like, and by the way, I'm going to buy you like 12 hours. I'm doing some mitigation. I'm going to approve it with my bot. I'm going to buy 24 hours by doing this and this and that. But it's just a patch. You need to fix it, right? And at least for us, this allows you to say, like, to end such a thing with like, look, guys, like first engineering, you did great. 24 hours from the first minute we saw this is a real problem until you fixed it. You were amazing. Let's celebrate this. Second, know that you can count on me to buy you the time and make you look like the hero in the end of this. And I think that today it's like, we're just not built in a way to do this type of a win-win situations. And we want to create this win-win situation.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point that you bring up, that I feel like we could keep talking for another hour or
Yeah.
two, right? But
Let's do it another
somehow,
time. It was fun.
yeah, it went by quick. Well, Daniel, I really do appreciate you coming on. I think it was a fantastic conversation. I definitely want to have you back on.
Same here. It was great. And I think going back to what you said, and it doesn't matter where people start. I think like both of us, you kind of mentioned where you started. I think that for everybody listening, I think if you're passionate about just learning and technologies, like don't be hesitant to get into security. Like the bar is high to get in, but the outcome is, it's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Daniel, before I let you go, how about you tell my audience where they could find your company if they wanted to learn more about your solution and whatnot, and maybe where they could find you if they wanted to connect.
Yeah, so our website is migo.io, migo .io, and we will love to speak with any one of you on going back to kind of how we can help you kind of reshape and rethink about the way we're doing product security today. And you can find us on LinkedIn, on web, on Twitter or X now, and you can of course send me direct LinkedIn messages. I'm trying to be as responsive as I can. Really, really love to meet everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, awesome. Thanks everyone. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. It was great having you on, Daniel, and I really do appreciate, you sticking with me there and still coming on.
No, of course. I'm really looking forward to hopefully continue this because I felt like there's so much more things we can talk about.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks everyone. I hope you enjoyed this episode. All right, bye.
Thanks so much.